My son recently got a port implanted, and so I kind of wanted to share our story, our journey, and how our experience was getting a port. I'm going to add in the disclaimer that this is for educational purposes. This is my personal experience, and also what led to us getting a port implanted for my son's rare genetic blood disorder. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, my goal with this video is for you to leave with a clear understanding of what a genetic blood disorder is and why ports can be implanted. My son has a blood disorder, which means that his blood does not clot like it should. My son's hemophilia B factor 9 is only at 1%. So what does that mean? An individual who does not have a blood disorder has a normal percentage of clotting factor 50 to 150%. We then have mild hemophilia at 5 to 40%, moderate hemophilia 1 to 5%, which is what my son has, and then lastly we have severe, which is less than 1%. So that means if an individual without hemophilia hits their head, falls, your body will naturally heal itself. However, my son who has hemophilia, if he falls or sometimes barely hits himself, he has severe bruising that will over time get bigger, result in hematomas, and could also lead to internal bleeding. That's why hemophilia untreated can be pretty dangerous. So the top picture represents what it looks like for an individual who does not have hemophilia. So if we look at this, again, you cut yourself, you hit something, even something small, you bang your leg on the side of the bed. Your body is going to create a clotting process to heal itself. Individuals who have hemophilia, as we can see, does not complete that process of healing. So what happens, like my son, is he will get a bruise, and within a few days it gets larger and larger. It can result in hematomas or even internal bleeding. So that is why we go to weekly treatments and we find different ways to support my son so that way he doesn't end up getting internal bleeding. We can stop bleeding and he can live a pretty normal life with modifications. Another symptom of hemophilia is muscle and joint bleeds, which can cause permanent damage. So another reason why we need weekly treatments to ensure that we don't get muscle or joint bleeds. Spontaneous bleeding can also occur. My son never had any spontaneous bleeding, but it can happen even later on in his life. He may have nosebleeds, mouth bleeds. A lot of times parents will go into their children's room and they will notice that there's blood all over their crib sheets and they don't know what's going on. So that is a symptom that we can see sometimes with hemophilia. My son, as I mentioned, only has his factor 9 at 1%. So he needs weekly injections. Our goal is to build up to 2 times a week of weekly injections, but we are only on 1 time a week right now. So that means that we have to give him weekly injections through an IV. So that means they have to be infused into his vein. So what happens is we have to find the vein and then we have to infuse with his factor treatment. So when we have to find a vein, it's not as easy as it sounds. Baby veins are very small, and so it's hard to find them. On top of that, I was told at the Children's Hospital that individuals who have hemophilia even have harder veins to find. So sometimes that can result in poking the vein. It can result in trying to find the vein, which results in damage. So this is a picture of some damage that my son had from getting an IV. As you can see, his arm is very swollen and he has quite a bit of bruising underneath the skin. To keep in mind, when my son got this damaged vein, this affected him overall. He at this time was only crawling, but he loved to crawl everywhere. He loved to try to climb, play with toys. He's just a busy kid. But when this happened, he literally just wanted to lay on the floor. He didn't want to eat any solids, which is unlike him because he loves eating food. And he slept a lot more than normal. So it took about 2 days of resting. All he wanted to do was nurse and drink water, which was great. Luckily, he was not getting dehydrated, and we had to ice it as much as we could. So again, getting a damaged vein can really affect a child. So here is some pictures of what hemophilia can look like. So he is my second child, and when he started getting these bruises, I knew that something wasn't right because my first child never bruised like this and she never had those lumps underneath her skin. These bruises can be from something so simple, him barely falling to the side and hitting something, because again, he only has that factor at 1%. A normal individual has a factor at 50 to 150%. So his body does not clot correctly. So bruising like this is not normal. We found out at the end of March that my son had hemophilia. We barely got treatment sent to our house in May. Because of insurance reasons, back and forth, which could be a whole other video, it takes a really long time to finally get treatment sent to our house. One evening, my husband and I noticed that my son had a really big bruise. We sent a picture to the specialist and she told us to go ahead and go to the ER. The ER had informed us, oops, we only have factor 8 treatment, not factor 9. So we did have to get my son flown to a children's hospital about an hour away. I live in a town of about 50,000 people and nobody has hemophilia B. When we were flown to the children's hospital, that city has about 2 million people and they said they have about 8 children who have hemophilia B. The nurse we work with, who works with other centers, she herself has hemophilia B. The latest study showed about 7,500 people within the United States have hemophilia B, so it's pretty rare. I want to make sure to include 2/3 of individuals who have hemophilia B have genetic history, and 1/3 of individuals do not have any genetic history. Nobody on either side of my family or my husband's family has hemophilia. I never have heard of it, and that was why I think it took us so long to get a diagnosis, because again, there was no family history. So the first time that we had stayed at the hospital, they had given us this crib and it was awful. My son thought it was a jungle gym. He hit his head. He was getting his foot stuck in between the bars. Luckily, the nurse saw what was going on and she let us use our own pack and play. So when we were going to have his surgery, we made sure to let them know ahead of time that this crib just did not work for us. And they ended up finding a solution, which I will discuss about in the next part. So the hospital ended up giving us this bed instead. It was amazing. It was much bigger. My son can play in there after surgery. He didn't end up hurting himself. And that way it just kept everyone at ease that, especially after surgery, he wasn't going to hit his head or he wasn't going to fall. So now let's get into the surgery part. So the day of surgery, they had us come in at 9 a.m., but his surgery was not supposed to start until about 11. It ended up being a lot later, but things happen. So before his surgery started, about 10 a.m., they came in, they gave him his factor treatment through his IV, and we kind of just hung out until he ended up going to surgery. It was way past nap time as we were waiting in the room, so my baby ended up falling asleep on my husband. My husband is a very big guy. My baby's big, and so my baby can rest comfortably on his chest. So thankful to have a supportive partner. After surgery, my baby slept for about 3 hours. He was very grumpy when he woke up, but he ended up sleeping on me and my husband off and on. And then after that, he was ready to eat. He was up playing around and he was doing really well. So before I show the picture, I'm going to let you know it does show the access point that they implant after surgery. So I'm not going to show all of it, but here you can see there is a tube. So there's an access point and a needle in there, and we have to keep it covered and we have to flush it every 12 hours. So we did have to stay the night of surgery because we live 4 hours away just to make sure there was no complications. My son ended up doing really well. And yes, so every 12 hours we had to flush it. We had an in-home nurse, but the first night we were home, we had to flush it ourselves. Our baby was not very happy. It was late. He probably was like, why is this coming home with me? What's going on? But it's been getting better. So the reason that we chose a port implant is, one, we can be independent with his treatment at home. So let's say we notice that my son has a big bruise. My husband and I, once we learn how to do the treatment, we can give him his treatment at home. We don't have to rush to the hospital, hope they have the treatment. A lot of hospitals will not accept your treatment. So that's why it's important for us to just be independent, especially if we're traveling or we're visiting family. We can have his treatment. We can be independent to give him his treatment. Second, we don't have to be digging for veins. We don't have to try to find his vein. We don't have to damage his veins. This is connected right to his big vein. Now, the thing to keep in mind, it has to be very sterile and there is a whole process, but I will get into that into another video. So that is why we chose the port implant. Let me know your thoughts or questions in the comments below.